The coverage of the Boston bombing took a sharp turn this week as the narrative moved to the motivation of the Tsarnaev brothers and whether federal authorities had bungled the case. There was some angry talk about Muslims as much of the media world picked sides, pointed fingers, and engaged in ideological sniping.
We may want to rethink now and say, do we want to allow any more Muslim students into this country, take a period of time, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and just stop that from happening?
I think we also have to examine the use of drones that the United States is involved in, and there are a lot of civilians who are innocently killed in a drone attack in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, and in Iraq.
So how exactly would you fight the war against terrorism, Tom? You want to invade Pakistan?
I think that Krauthammer and O'Reilly going after the president and saying he's not being tough enough on Muslims smells a little bit like a precursor to, is the president actually secretly a Muslim?
So what explains the ugliness that erupted just a week after the marathon was marred by violence? Joining us now in Los Angeles, Cenk Uygur, host of the Young Turks on Current TV and on the web. In Seattle, Michael Medved, host of the syndicated Michael Medved radio show. And here in Washington, Jane Hall, associate professor at American University's School of Communications. Cenk Uygur, has the tone on the airwaves about what happened in Boston gotten too vitriolic?
Well, it has, but we know why. I mean, let's be honest about who makes it vitriolic. It's usually Fox News talking about Muslims, which is ironic because this is the same Bill O'Reilly who kept calling Dr. Tiller the baby killer until Scott Roeder shot him. So here's a fundamentalist that's a Christian worried about fundamentalists who are Muslims and driving people to violence. I mean, understand. It's incredibly ironic.
I understand why you as a liberal would want to blame Fox News, but when you have something as we just played, MSNBC's Alex Wagner saying that Charles Krauthammer and Bill O'Reilly are on the verge of calling President Obama a Muslim because of the criticism of the president's remarks. Neither of those guys has gone anywhere near that garbage, so it's not entirely just on one side.
Well, I mean, it's a funny way of balancing things out, Howard. I mean, on the one side, you have a guy who keeps saying Muslim terrorist, trying to equate the two. On the other side, you have someone saying, hey, maybe that's not that wise, and maybe they're implying something here that they shouldn't be implying. So I don't equate those two as equal. It's just to say that one side does something 1% or 10% may be wrong doesn't justify the other side doing something 100% wrong. And if Bill O'Reilly wants to keep going in that direction, hey, listen, do you know that since 1995, 56% of the terrorist acts in the United States have been right-wing terrorists. Only 12% have been Muslim terrorists.
I want to bring Michael Medved into the conversation. Same question to you. Is the media tone on this in some quarters too vitriolic? And you've just heard Cenk blame it mostly on Fox News.
Okay, when you're talking about an event like Boston, which is so horrifying, and there are 30 people who are still in the hospital, and there are people who are permanently crippled, when you say too vitriolic, I mean, the American people are upset. It's the most serious, successful terrorist attack on the homeland itself since 9/11. It's a serious matter. And in terms of the association with radical Islam, look, first of all, it's not just Fox News. CNN and, yes, even MSNBC and the major networks have all covered the fact, and very appropriately, that it was his process of Islamization, his process of becoming more, quote, devoted to his faith, that led Tamerlan Tsarnaev toward his terrorism. And this is the difference with all those, quote, right-wing attacks that Cenk wants to talk about. You can't point. Timothy McVeigh was not a Christian terrorist. He did not commit his heinous acts based upon some kind of Christian ideology. In fact, he said he was an agnostic, and he rejected formal Christianity. People
I want to broaden
alone in Islam.
I want to broaden this, Michael, but let me ask you, some people think that those in the mainstream media, perhaps those left-leaning, are shying away from the notion that Islam and religion played a role in the radicalization of these suspects. Do you not agree with that?
I think that occasionally you hear voices like that, but I think that your network, for instance, has done a pretty good job. And one of the reasons for that is because the whole Tsarnaev family is making it so easy. I mean, when you have the mother of the year, Zubaydat Tsarnaev, saying Allahu Akbar and sounding like the Wicked Witch of the East, it makes it pretty easy to make the association.
All right, let me bring in Jane Hall. Let me take you back to this core question. Why are some hosts and some pundits on the warpath, ideologically and otherwise, over this Boston tragedy?
I think that Fox is practically waging a campaign to link the words radical and Islam. I don't think radical Islam is a religion. I think what happens can be a perversion, from what I understand, of religion. I don't think the media should shy away from looking at how these young men got radicalized, what he learned when he went back to Russia. I don't think we should shy away, and I think sometimes we do. But I think that there is a difference between endlessly linking this and saying, you know, they're helpfully having visuals that say radical Islam with these young men's pictures and talking about how they should have been shot in the boat and how the wife of one of the suspects should be imprisoned simply because she was wearing a headdress in the Muslim religion. I think that is...
Not everybody on Fox is saying that.
Many people on Fox are saying that. Many people on Fox are saying that.
I'm sorry, that's just not true. Ann Coulter made a couple of really outrageous comments, which disturbed me as well. But you are not hearing stuff like, other than from Ann Coulter, that
Bob
the fact
Beckel?
that Catherine Russell...
Who's a liberal, by the way,
Bob Beckel?
saying don't let Muslims
who's a
go
liberal
to
voice on
for
Fox.
Marx.
And again, I don't... Look, the point about this is that it is the Tsarnaev family themselves. Uncle Ruslan Tsarny, he was the one who initiated this idea, this trope in the media, talking about his own nephews, that it was the fact that they had become involved with what he called all this religious nonsense that led them into violence. So it's to single out Fox News.
You guys are missing it.
Wait, my point is that we don't know what happened here, and yet there is a rush to tar all Muslims with radicalism. That's my point. I think it is in many places on Fox. I really think that if you look at it, it's across a lot of different shows on Fox.
So I think Jane is right about that. But the main point, guys, is fundamentalism. Whether it's Muslim fundamentalism or it's Christian fundamentalism. And, Michael, get real. I mean, we've had how many abortion doctors killed because of Christian fundamentalists? The Olympic Park bomber was a Christian fundamentalist.
True. It's not
fundamentalism
true.
that connects it. It is
okay,
true.
it is,
Eric, hold on.
It is not.
You know what it's called? Army of God.
Time out. I want to say a couple things, and then we'll resume this conversation. Let me tell you what bothers me about the tone on the airwaves, and I don't want to see us descend into the same kind of tone here. Everybody who does commentary for a living is entitled to say what they think. This is, as you say, Michael Medved, an emotional issue. But it seems to me everyone has reverted to what they do, which is finger-pointing, demonizing, blaming the other side, whipping up their base. You do it for ratings. You do it for clicks. What bothers me is it doesn't match the moment. The country was in shock and in grief and kind of coming together over the fact that not only were 3 people killed in Boston, but a couple of hundred were wounded, maimed, people lost their legs, and yet we're back to the same old partisan sniping. All right, Cenk, you pick it up.
All right, so 2 things about that that's really important. Number one, you know, look, Howard, there's a part of me that disagrees with you, and I'll tell you why, okay? It's because after tragedies like this, we do have to take action, and the question is, what kind of action are we going to take? And I said before we found out the suspect's identity here, because that was really an interesting moment. We didn't know whether they were right-wing or that we didn't know if they were Muslims. We didn't know who they were. I said our reaction should be the same no matter what, so that right-wingers, left-wingers, whoever should all agree what our proper reaction should be before we find out who it is, so we don't fly off the handle either way. At the same time, if there's a mass shooting or there's an act of terrorism, we do have to respond, and there are political differences about how we respond.
Nobody...
obviously, I think the right-wing guys, go overboard, and we invaded Iraq after 9/11 for no reason, etc. But it is a moment where we have to make decisions.
Everyone agrees that these are important issues, that these are emotional issues, and they should be debated. I am talking about what I see in some instances, and you see it this week, you didn't see it so much last week, as the ugly tone. Do you agree, Jane Hall, that this has almost become the default setting for a lot of people who are on the air who, in order to kickstart their careers, they need to whip up, you know, a certain degree of animosity.
Well, I think that as time goes by and there's air to fill, you know, people do that. I will say that I think a lot of people have tried to attach meaning to, you know, some people have said this is how it proves that we need good government. Barney Frank said that and got a lot of criticism. Lawrence O'Donnell and others on MSNBC have talked about this as a need for gun control.
Right.
People are attaching meaning to this partially because we are all fearful about how can we prevent this. I mean, there's a legitimate fear and a legitimate concern, but I do think people attach their agendas to it.
Well, legitimate fear, legitimate concern, legitimate debate, but also, in my view, a degree of exploitation and whipping things up because that's how you get people to watch you on the air.